So much for coming out. My name is Tony Penny, and I am the Chief Learning Officer here at the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. And it's tradition that we begin each event here with the Pledge of Allegiance. So if I could ask you to please rise and join me in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Please be seated if you can. I know they're still bringing in some chairs for some folks in the back. So before I introduce our special guest to the stage, I want to take just a moment to recognize a few of the important folks who are joining us in the audience today. So first I want to start with two very good friends of the Reagan Foundation. One's an award-winning journalist, former White House correspondent for the Washington Post, and a noted biographer of President Reagan. Please welcome Mr. Lou Cannon and his wife, Mary. Thank you so much for coming today. From our foundation, President Reagan's former Chief of Staff, our Chief Administrative Officer, the wonderful Joanne Drake. Thank you for being here. Our good friend and partner from procon.org, Mr. Kami Akavan. Great website. Make sure you use it. And this event itself is the result of some really wonderful collaboration with some great partners, both here and nationally. So I want to thank our partners at Facing History and ourselves. Mary, thank you so much for helping us with this. There's a great team. You might have seen the posters outside, but very instrumental in putting this together. The team from the Minetta Legacy Project, thank you so much for being here. And of course, a few of our partners and good friends from the Japanese American National Museum. Thank you so much for coming out today. And finally, I want to pay a very special tribute to some distinguished guests we have joining us in the audience today. Several formerly incarcerated Japanese Americans and their families. If you could please stand so we could recognize you and thank you for being here today. So in 1988, President Reagan signed a piece of legislation called the Civil Liberties Act. It was a piece of legislation that authorized restitution payments to the tens of thousands of surviving Japanese Americans who had been relocated and incarcerated during World War II. At the signing ceremony, he said, quote, "My fellow Americans, we gather here today to right a grave wrong. More than 40 years ago, shortly after the bombing of Pearl Harbor, 120,000 persons of Japanese ancestry living in the United States were forcibly removed from their homes and placed in makeshift internment camps. This action was taken without trial, without jury. It was based solely on race, and for these 120,000, they were Americans of Japanese descent. We must recognize that this internment was a mistake. For throughout the war, Japanese Americans in the tens of thousands remained utterly loyal to the United States. Indeed, scores of Japanese Americans volunteered for the armed forces, many stepping forward from the camps themselves. The 442nd Regimental Combat Team, made up entirely of Japanese Americans, served with immense distinction to defend this nation. Yet back at home, the soldiers' families were being denied the very freedom for which so many of these soldiers themselves were laying down their lives. We're here to share a very personal story of what that was like today. We are honored to have a truly incredible man, a truly incredible American from my hometown of San Jose, Secretary Norman Mineta, who's going to come up to stage in just a second. We can clap for Secretary Mineta, absolutely. He was instrumental in the passage of this piece of legislation and was there with President Reagan in August of 1988 when it was signed. Joining him on stage today will be a member of our education team, our Associate Director of Education, Ms. Megan Gately, whose passion, interest, study, and work on Japanese incarceration over her professional career makes her uniquely qualified from among our team to be the person to conduct this interview. She's been on the board of the Japanese American Citizens League here in Ventura County for many years and has studied, written, and created curriculum around Japanese incarceration. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Megan and Secretary Mineta to the stage.
You're just going to take this up.
You want to take
Yeah, just take it on up here.
Thank you very much, sir. Oh, you got it.
Okay, I'm gonna sit right here. Okay. Okay, good morning. Good morning, all. Thank you all for being here today. Just want to thank Secretary Minetta for being here to tell your story to the students, teachers, distinguished guests, and those of us who are very interested in this piece of history. We would be here way too long if I named all of Secretary Minetta's accomplishments, but I want to make sure everyone knows the length and depth of your service to this country. Secretary Minetta served 6 years in the presidential cabinet as a U.S. Secretary of Transportation and Secretary of Commerce. Prior to that, a long history of congressional service as a representative from California in the House of Representatives. He served in the Army as an intelligence officer before starting his life in politics, first as a city councilman and then mayor of San Jose. That's the briefest introduction I could do for a man of his stature, but everyone please welcome Secretary Minetta. So to jump right in, please introduce us to the Minetta family and settlement in San Jose, your parents, what life was like for the Minettas.
Well, first of all, I chose very carefully the family that I was born into. Great father, great mother, 3 wonderful older sisters, older brother, and I was the youngest of 5, and sort of the caboose of the 5 children. And but there's no question that and my dad had come from Japan as a 14-year-old by himself, and having boarded the ship in Yokohama and not knowing the geography of the United States, and he had an uncle who was working for Speckles Sugar Company in Salinas, California, which is about 120 miles south of San Francisco. And the uncle had written to his brother, my father's father, said, you ought to send one of your sons to the United States to see what farming is like. So my dad was the number 2 son, and he figures everything goes to number 1 son, so I'll go see. So as a 14-year-old, he gets on the ship in Yokohama, and instead of getting off in San Francisco, he gets off in Seattle, Washington, 800 miles from where he should be, doesn't know English, doesn't know anybody, and he worked in the farm labor camp in the Seattle area and worked his way down to Salinas. Took him a year and a half to do that. So he gets to Salinas. He's now 16 years old, and his uncle said, you've got to learn English. Excuse me. So he put him in the 1st grade. So here he is, 16 or so, a little 14 at the 16 and a half. And he was about 5'3". So some of those kids in that school were getting as tall as he was, so it becomes an incentive to learn English very quickly. So by the end of his 2nd grade, he figured he knew enough English, so he graduated himself from the 2nd grade. And by that time, he was 17, and so Speckles Sugar Company gave him a job. So he worked for Speckles Sugar Company, and then they sent him from Salinas to a little community south of San Jose called San Martin to set up a sugar beet farm operation there. And he did that, and then in 1918, I think it was, there was this worldwide Spanish influenza in which 25-30 million people died around the world. And my father ended up in Santa Clara County Hospital for close to 7 months. And they released him, and then they said, farming is too strenuous. You can't go back into farming. So he moved the family into San Jose, and started doing a lot of odd jobs. And one day he was a court interpreter. And so these two fellows came up and said, "How'd you like to go into the life insurance business?" He said, "I know nothing about life insurance." He said, "Well, we'll train you." So in 1919, he finally went up to San Francisco to meet these two people had met, and decided he would become a life insurance agent, which he started in 1920. And so that was our family background. And then, of course, when December 7th, 1941 hit, we had just come home from church about 12:15, 12:30, and my mother loved to listen to music, so she had the radio turned to a music station, and then all of a sudden, of course, we break into this program to bring you this latest news. And it was about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th. And my dad, being in the insurance business in San Jose, people called him right away saying, "What's going to be the impact on us given what's happening in Hawaii?" And so people were dropping by the office or calling. And so I would sit behind a glass door with the curtains there and could hear the conversation of the people who were coming to see my father. And of course, being 10 years old and listening to all this and not having really any knowledge about what the impact would be on us, I listened to these conversations. And then about 1:30, George Serrano from next door came running in through the back door saying, "The police are taking Papa away, police are taking Papa away." So my dad ran out the front door and went next door, but by that time Mr. Hirano was gone. Mrs. Hirano, who took Mr. Hirano away? I have no idea. Irving, who was about 15 at the time, who was it? I don't know, they were just in dark suits and took Papa away. And it turned out he wasn't sure, so my dad called the city manager of San Jose and said, "What's going on?" He said, "I have no knowledge about what you're talking about, but talk to the chief of police." So my dad talked to the chief of police, and he said, "I have no idea what you're talking about. Talk to Sheriff Emick." So he called Sheriff Emick, and Sheriff Emick said, "I know about it, but it's not my operation, it's the FBI. And I'll call the FBI and have them call you about what's going on." Well, about 4:30 or so that afternoon, the FBI agent came to the house and said they were rounding up people who were sympathetic to the efforts of the Japanese. And so Mr. Hirano was the executive secretary of the Japanese Association, which was a social organization. And, they would set up community picnics and things of that nature. And the FBI agent was saying we were picking up Buddhist priests, teaching people who taught Japanese classes, Shinto priests, and community leaders. Well, when the FBI agent said community leaders, my dad thought, well, I'm a community leader. But he wasn't being talked to or being picked up. So he was sort of insulted in a way. So as soon as the FBI agent left, my mother and dad packed a suitcase just in case they came back, but fortunately they never did. So that was the confusion and chaos that was going on within the Japanese American community. And then Executive Order 9066 was signed on February 19th of 1942, and it delegated to the War Department the ability to evacuate persons. It didn't say German, Italian, Japanese. It just said ability to evacuate persons. And so soon after that, these big placards would start going up on the utility poles and sides of buildings, instructions, to all those of Japanese ancestry, alien and non-alien. And I saw that sign, and I said to my brother, who's 9 years older than me, he was a sophomore at San Jose State College. I said, well, what's a non-alien? He said, that's you. What do you mean that's me? I'm a citizen. No, in this case, it means the same thing. And that's why to this day, I cherish the word citizen, because the United States government, my own government, wasn't willing to describe me as a citizen. Now, I don't know when the last time any of you stood on a chair, beat your chest and said, I'm a proud non-alien of the United States of America. I don't think you have. And so to this day, I still cherish the word citizen. Well, all we could take to camp was what we could carry. And at that time, my proudest possession was my dog, Skippy. I love peanut butter, and so I called the dog Skippy. And I had to give the dog away because we couldn't take Skippy with us. Excuse me, is that water there?
Right here.
Thank you. And my dad's proudest possession was he bought a 1942 Packard Clipper in November of '41. And I think he paid something like $1,100 for it. And then in March, he had to sell it for $300. He didn't want to store it. So, but it was a very chaotic time. And I've only seen my dad cry 3 times. Once was on December 7th. I hope I'm not blowing out the ear of whoever the technician is who's listening. Once was on December 7th, 1941, because he couldn't understand why the country of his birth was attacking the country of his heart. He came to love this country very, very much. So the second time we left was I saw him cry, was May 29, 1942, when we were on the train leaving San Jose to go to a camp. And at that point, when we first got on the train, we didn't know where we were going. And then the rumors on the train was that we were going to go to Santa Anita, the racetrack. And because after the signing of Executive Order 9066, there was a commanding general of the Western Civil Defense Command by the name of General DeWitt. And he coined the phrase, once a JAP, always a JAP. And he figured if the Japanese could attack Pearl Harbor, the Japanese probably could attack the West Coast. And so what do I do with the 120,000 people in Washington, Oregon, and California? And so he immediately commandeered the racetracks and county fairgrounds because they had a built-in living quarters, namely horse stables. And so we were on the train going to Santa Anita, the racetrack, here near Los Angeles. And then this is the third time I saw him cry was when my mother passed away. And then in November of '42, we were moved from Santa Anita, the racetrack near Los Angeles, to Hart Mountain, Wyoming. And the camp was located about 15 miles east of Cody, Wyoming, and Cody was about 50, 60 miles away from Yellowstone National Park in that northwest region of Wyoming. And schools hadn't been built yet, so, and the day we got there was just really cold, and the tumbleweed was sagebrush blowing around, the silt sand was just peppering our faces. And being Californians, we didn't have any warm clothing. We would just had light jackets, and so we were really freezing. And but the camp elders were worried about what about the young people with no schools yet. So they wrote to the Boy Scouts of America and Girl Scouts of America, please come and organize troops within our camps. So we had a troop in Heart Mountain, or not a troop, we had about 10. And we'd have our own jamboree within the camp, and our scout leaders would write to the Boy Scouts in Ralston, Deaver, Powell, Cody, saying, come on in and join us for our jamboree. Thank you for the invitation, but there's barbed wire all around that camp, and there are military guard towers with searchlights and machine guns. We're not going in there. Those are POWs. And the scout leaders would write back, no, these are not POWs. They're Boy Scouts of America, just like you. They wear the same uniform, and they read the same manual, they go after the same merit badge as you do. So finally, a Boy Scout troop from Cody came in. So we did our knot tying contest and woodworking contest and all the things, how to start a fire without a match and all the things Boy Scouts do. And then we got paired off with a kid from the Cody troop to put up our tent. So I got paired off with this kid, and in Wyoming it could rain anytime and a lot. So you have to build a moat around your tent to protect the tent. So we built our moat, beautiful moat. And then he said, there's a kid from my troop in the tent below us. I don't really care for it. Would you mind if we cut the water to exit that way if in case it rains? No skin off my nose, so I said, sure. So we built this beautiful moat and cut the exit to water to exit that way. And as luck would have it, it started raining. And our moat worked perfectly, and the water drained down that way. Pretty soon the tent pegs on that tent went down, and the tent came down. Kids in my tent going, ha, 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 hee, ho, 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 just laughing. And I finally said to him, Alan, would you please shut up so we get some sleep? And that was Alan Simpson, who eventually became the U.S. Senator from Wyoming. He was as ornery then as he is today. But I always said that I knew him when he had hair and he was roly-poly. You know, isn't that amazing? Today you think of him with no hair and lanky, tall Alan Simpson. And we still have, twice a year we have vacations together, and we probably are on the phone 4 or 5 times a month. It's a wonderful friendship. I just love him so much. He's just a great, great friend. And this friendship has endured since 1943. In 1974, I got elected to the House, and then he got elected to the Senate in 1978. So our friendship went back as if we were still sitting in that pup tent in 1943.
We've heard it described as a comedy show between the two of them, as 70-year comedy between the two of them. Well, I wanted to ask you, Norm, because a lot of our young people in the audience and a lot of what we do here in education at the foundation is about leadership and young people, like in the audience, finding their own leadership path. So after coming out of camp, going back and trying to assimilate back into American society and culture, what did that mean for you? Because I know you went on to be the president of your high school, and then going on to serve in the Army and then give back to your country. So what was that like? Describe that leadership path starting post-camp.
Well, I by background, after I came out of the Korean War and came back to the U.S., or back to San Jose, I went into the insurance business with my father. And in 1967, we had a directly elected mayor for the first time. So a member of the city council, Ron James, was elected mayor, and that created a vacancy on the city council. So Ron, the new mayor, and two incumbent members of the city council came and said, you know, we'd like to have you apply for that vacancy because we're going to fill it by appointment. And I said, well, I'm in the insurance business with my father. Let me talk to him first. So when I talked to my father, he said, you know, we can manage the business any way we want. But he said in Japan there was an old adage that if you're in politics, you're going to be like that nail sticking out of the board. And he says, you know what happens to that nail? It gets hammered. It gets hammered by friends, constituents, neighbors, whomever. Can you stand being hammered by your friends and neighbors? And I said, well, it's only for a 2-year unexpired term. I can still stay active in the insurance business. So I said, you know, I think maybe I'll apply for that vacancy. And I did, and I was appointed to fill that vacancy. So it's for a 2-year unexpired term, and I found I was enjoying it. So I actually ran for a 4-year term in 1969. And then in 1971, at the end of the 4-year, the mayor decided not to seek re-election, and by that time I was vice mayor. So people said, we want you to run for mayor. So I did. And so when I started as mayor, the population of San Jose was 320,000. And in 4 years, it went to 580,000. And I did a lot of things to try to slow down the growth, keep less of the annexation program going on, to try to get a handle on our growth. And the big thing I did was to not have our present residents of San Jose pay for the future growth of people coming in. And I put a tax on the developers for the streets, sewers, school system, and got sued by the developers. But it went to the California State Supreme Court, and it was upheld. And that's how we financed our growth in San Jose on people coming in to buy those homes, et cetera. And so that gave me the ability in 1974 then to consider running. And I remember it was the third Sunday in January 1974. My phone rings. Well, what do you do at 5:45 in the morning? Oh. Hey, Norm, did you see the paper? I said, are you kidding? It's 5:45 in the morning on Sunday. No, I haven't seen the paper. So Charlie Goopser, who had been the member of Congress for 26 years, was going to be stepping down, not seeking re-election. And he said, you got to run. I said, no. In September, I said I was going to seek re-election as mayor, and Tom, the mayor of Los Angeles at the time, came up to do a fundraiser for me in October of 1973. So I said, I'm on my path to seek re-election. And anyway, in March of 74, I decided maybe I'll take a shot at running for Congress. So I returned all the money I had raised for mayor of San Jose. I returned it to the folks. But I suggested that now that I'm running for mayor, you know, if you care to contribute, that would be fine. And so I was elected in November of 74. And I've got to say, the Congress then is vastly different from what it is today. You could work with people. Democrats and Republicans were working together. Today, part of it is the problem is the schedule. Today, the Congress convenes with its first vote on Tuesday at 6:30. So members come in to DC late Tuesday afternoon for that 6:30 vote. They're there Wednesday, and the last vote is 3 o'clock on Thursday. But in the last 4 years, there have only been 47 meetings on a Thursday. So most members leave Thursday morning to go back to their districts. They don't get to know each other. I still deal with members of Congress. They frankly don't know the subject matters of the committees they're on. And the word compromise today is such a bad word. And yet you can compromise on whether you're going to spend $250 million on a project or on something versus 200 or 1.3 billion, whatever. But they're not doing that. And so it's really a shame to see this non-communication among the members. And we used to fight in subcommittee and committee, full committee, rules committee, on the House floor, and then slap each other on the back and say, come on, let's go have dinner, let's go have drinks. And they just don't do that today. And to me, that's driven mostly by the schedule. So over the years, I have found that there was a great deal of cooperation and communication. And I remember in April of 1995, Alan Simpson called me up, said, I want to see you. So I said, why don't you come over tomorrow, 2 o'clock? You want me, a U.S. Senator, to come over to the House of Representatives to visit you? And I said, oh, you imperial bum. Okay, I'll meet you in your office tomorrow at 2 o'clock. And he said, Ann and I are leaving on Thursday, and on Friday, I'm announcing that I'm not seeking re-election in 1996. I said, why are you doing that? You're in the majority, you ought to stick around. He said, no, civility is starting to go, and I want to get out of here before it's all gone. Now that was in April of 1995. He already sensed that there was some of this element of civility that was starting to go. And so Alan left the Senate and has done a lot of community service work since then. How do we rebuild that? I think part of that is really the schedule. But I want to say to the young people in this audience today, there are two things you own that nobody else owns. One is your name, and the other is integrity. Do everything you can to protect your name and your integrity. Because if you don't have integrity, you don't have anything that people can trust you about in terms of any future dealings. And so, to me, trust and integrity work together. So I want you all to remember to protect your name and your integrity. I remember when Senator Inoue was leaving Hawaii to join the Army in 1944, and his father was walking him to the bus station to go off to war. And the father said, do everything to be loyal to your country and do not bring dishonor to the family. And that was his behavior. Everything was built around not bringing dishonor to the family. And so I want all of you to remember that as you go through life, don't take shortcuts, but stay in terms of protecting your integrity and trust among people.
Well, we want to leave time for questions from our students in the audience, but before we get to that, for those of us who haven't seen the documentary, would you please tell us the significance of the flag that you wear on your lapel just above your Presidential Medal of Freedom?
Even today, less so today, but there are still times when I'm being treated like a foreigner. So I proudly wear this flag to say, I'm an American, proud of it. I'm also proud of my Japanese ancestry. I don't run away from it. And when I became a member of the City Council, I said at the time that I was going to speak out and represent those who had no representation or who had less representation than they should. And I became the first non-white to become a member of the City Council. And the population in San Jose at that time was about 1.5% black, 3% Asian, about 12 to 14% Hispanic. And so I always said that I was going to speak out for those who didn't have representation or were underrepresented. So that's something I followed as a city council, mayor, member of Congress, and all the jobs I've had, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Transportation, to speak out. And in 1991, I was the principal author of something called the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act. Up to then, it had always been highway bills. And the National Defense Highway Bill that President Eisenhower signed in 1956 was all about highways and automobiles. And so in the 1991 legislation, I brought in mass transit. In fact, changed the name of the Urban Mass Transit Administration, because that sort of implies urban, no recognition of the farming and rural communities, and changed the name to Federal Transit Administration. And so over the years have tried to do things to bring new thought patterns into whatever we were doing.
Okay, questions from our audience. There'll be people coming around with mics, so especially our students, now's your chance.
Thank you very much for coming here. You're a great American.
Well, thank you.
I'm impressed with you for many reasons, but in your capacity as a transportation czar, it seems like you have a lot of common sense, which is lacking among many of our state and federal officials these days, let alone intelligence. We need some type of private enterprise transportation czar here in California, not a politician, because a lot of these people don't have a clue on dealing with traffic jams. Like 30+ years ago, they talked about building a tramway on the 405 from the San Fernando Valley through the Sepulveda Pass, which is an excellent idea and could have been done decades ago. And then they recently brought it up again, and they didn't do it. But here in California, over 6 years, we spent $70 to $77 billion on the train. That type of stupidity and fiscal irresponsibility would never be tolerated in private enterprise. when a CEO would have to answer to tens of millions of shareholders and maybe 12 to 15 people on a board of directors. If you don't solve the problems quickly, you are gone, and that's the way it should be with some of these politicians. Thank you. So, you know, if you have any ideas on how to put together some type of transportation czar here made up of private individuals, I would like to hear from you.
Are you ready for public office again? I think you've got a campaign manager there.
That might be a good idea.
No, really, running for public office is for young people, and I'm 87 years old. In fact, I said to a friend of mine last November, my age and IQ are the same. But the good news is next year my IQ is going to go up. And then he said, "You think that's good?" He said, "I hit age, IQ, and golf score." And I said, "Harry, don't tell me you're hitting 92. He says, "Well, it sounds good, but it's probably more like my bowling score." But in any event, Harry's out there, 92 years old, plays once a week, 9 holes, hits a straight ball, not long. But one of the problems, I think, is that we don't have what you alluded to, and that's the private sector influence in transportation. And one of the things that I did in 2003 when I was Secretary of Transportation was to encourage and to, well, first we had to get legislation to allow it. And that was to allow what we now call P3s, public-private partnerships. And there are only 27 states in the country that allow public-private partnerships. And then even when you do get a state to allow public-private partnerships, there's still contracting firms who oppose this P3 approach on the basis they won't be able to build the transit systems under the grants that are given by the federal government. And I think there are really a lot of good opportunities for companies to participate, working with the public sector through their own investments in these systems. And I only wish that there were more firms willing to step up to do that. The other part of it is we need a much more balanced approach on what's happening. China is now building 17,000 miles of high-speed rail, and we're nowhere near that. We have systems, maybe let's say San Diego to Los Angeles. We have a good system in Portland, Seattle, Vancouver. There's one that's starting now in Detroit to Chicago to St. Louis to New Orleans. But that's going to still be for a long time away. And we had money here in the state of California under a federal grant, but the president doesn't look very highly on California, and he just canceled a $900 million grant to the state of California and is now insisting that California pay back to the federal government $2.7 billion. And now he's also announced that he's going to start a program to bring people into sanctuary cities. So he's really aiming at California in terms of what's happening. And until something happens, all we're going to have is a Bakersfield to Merced high-speed rail, whatever that means. But Texas is trying to start one. Florida has a short high-speed rail from Miami to, I believe it's to Jacksonville, but they want to go on to St. Petersburg and Tampa area. But there are very few efforts on high-speed rail, and yet like the Washington, D.C., New York City, Boston corridor could really be one that could be subject of a high-speed rail. And then on top of that, you know, the other thing that's really changing is that of 18-year-olds today, only 40% have driver's licenses. And and I remember when I was 14 and a half, and at that time there was, because we were an agriculture state, and I was picking prunes and picking pears and cutting cots. At that point, we could get our driver's license at 14 and a half. Man, I couldn't wait to get my driver's license at 14 and a half. And yet I've got grandchildren who are 18 and go, oh, when it comes to driving, they're just not interested. And so it's a different world. And so, again, our transportation system also has to reflect that. And the last gasoline tax increase we had was 1993, and that was for a federal gasoline tax of 18.4 cents a gallon, and hasn't changed since then. And yet costs have gone like this, and the gas tax is the same. So the Highway Trust Fund goes bankrupt every year because it's building very little and spending probably about 80 to 85% of the money coming into the Highway Trust Fund for maintenance of what has already been built, and very little towards new construction. And new construction is so much more expensive than the maintenance that we're spending to keep our roads in good shape.
Okay, we have time for one more. We'd love to hear from a student of some of your questions. Here comes the mic.
If you can change one thing in the government, what would you change?
I'm sorry,
If you could change one thing in the government?
in governance?
Yep.
Next question. As I look at the federal system, at least as far as it relates to Congress, I think that schedule has to change. I remember when we were there, when I was serving in Congress, the first vote was 12 noon on Monday, and the last vote was 3 o'clock on Friday. And so we got to know each other. We got to know the subject matters of the committee assignments we had. And I think that really has to be one of the fundamental changes that has to be made at the federal level. And the other thing is the whole issue of electing people to public office, not on the basis of just popularity, but in terms of who has a vision about where we're going. And you know, today, one of the things that I don't know if I would do well if I were to run for office. I hear a lot about this democratic socialism. Frankly, I'm a democratic capitalist. I think there has to be that market impact on the, and sure, I want everybody to be able to go to college without any cost. And I hear the rhetoric of what candidates are saying today, but I don't see the plan on how they're going to do it, because all of this costs money. And the incumbent already has increased the national debt by $1.3 trillion. So given that load, how are we going to be talking about health care? So there's Medicare for everybody, education for everybody. And so I'm really concerned about what's happening. And I blame the Democratic National Party for this, because to me, I'll give you my personal opinion so I can be shunning off the stage soon. Bernie Sanders should not have been talking to the Democratic National Convention. He should have been at the he should have been at the Socialist Party convention. And yet he gave a speech at the Democratic National Convention, and it took hold. And remember how close he came to defeating Mrs. Clinton in terms of her effort at that. And she had her own baggage in terms of her background and popularity. But so I'm just questioning the direction we're going right now. But as I said, I'm a democratic capitalist. I just feel that we have to have some market force working on what happens in society. And so, okay, next question.
Well, we're coming to the end. We have about 1 minute left. So I just wanted you to leave us a parting words for all of us in a minute or less, since we've only really tapped on the tip of the iceberg.
Here's a young
Okay, I'm getting that this is a VIP student who must be heard. So,
all right, so I wanted to ask, what is your current opinion on our president today?
I'm sorry, what?
What is your opinion on our current president today?
This is when I should have said next question. Frankly, there is no redeeming quality of the incumbent right now. And I don't understand how someone can make a statement and this afternoon deny that he said it or even took that position. And so that's why I talked about integrity in the individuals we elect to office. To me, that's foremost. And so I don't think, I mean, how do I say to our grandchildren, talking about the presidency, you know, we were taught to respect the office, which I do, and I know all of you do, but I don't respect the individual who occupies the office right now. And when I think about someone like my dad coming at the age of 14, and we have a president that says, well, we need more Norwegians coming into the country. Or he talks about people from Mexico as being criminals, rapists, and describing them in that way. He even talked about MS-13, and most of those MS-13s are probably born here and are the gang leaders of MS-13 and not immigrants from Nicaragua. My daughter-in-law is from Nicaragua. Her father was deputy police chief of Managua, Nicaragua, and shot and killed by the Sandinistas. So they fled Nicaragua, went to San Jose, Costa Rica, and the Catholic Social Service brought them to the United States. And so I have a wonderful daughter-in-law from Nicaragua, and our grandchildren speak Spanish. They're trying to get some Japanese immersion in there too. But Presley, the oldest of those grandchildren, is now 8, and she said, Japanese is too difficult. So, but no, the thing is that, again, and I'll go back to my theme about integrity, and I just don't see that in the incumbent right now.
our final question, take it away, Joanne.
Mr. Secretary, I just want to thank you. It is a privilege having you here. I was privileged to serve under Ronald Reagan in his second term in Washington, And I came to know him as a man and a leader with a great deal of integrity, great leadership characteristics. You also had that reputation in Washington. You still do. You are a man of great integrity. And I wondered if you could leave us with some thoughts, particularly as a man who spent time in a Japanese internment camp during the war. You were put there by our government, by those who fly the flag that you wear on your lapel today. I want to know what it took to come out of that internment camp and say to yourself, well, now I want to serve this country. This is my country. You had to dig pretty deep, I imagine, and I'm just wondering what kind of leadership characteristics and personality traits did you have to dig into to become the man that you are today?
Our Father, who art in heaven. But no, the thing is that, I was a 10-year-old kid, and so that anger, there wasn't the anger about it. Later on, I remember I was a human relations commissioner for the city of San Jose. And when I was getting married, I wanted to get an apartment. So I would go different places and answer to a newspaper ad on apartments. And I went to this one place, and the woman answered the door, and I said, I'd like to look at the apartment that you have rented. And she looked at me and she said, let me check with my husband. I think he might have rented it. So he comes to the door and looks at me and says, oh, yeah, it's been rented. So I said, okay, thank you very much. So I went to the gas station on the corner. We didn't have cell phones. We could call and, come on over. You can see it. So I came back 5 minutes later. And I said, I'd like to see the apartment. He said, I just told you it's been rented. No, but I just called you from the gas station, and you said, yeah, come on over. I'll show it to you. And, I got this sort of, what kind of a wise guy are you routine. And so that kind of experience, plus seeing the impact on what it did to people like my parents and a vintage of theirs, people like my sister, who was in the School of Education in San Jose State in 1936. And the professor said to her, what are you doing in the School of Education? I want to be a teacher. Well, I hate to rain on your parade, but there isn't a school district in the state of California that'll hire you. And that was in 1936. So she decided she would change to become an accounting major, become a CPA. So she became in the School of Commerce. Well, when you want to become a CPA, you have to work under the direct supervision of a CPA. In 1940, she couldn't get a job with an accounting firm with a CPA who would do that kind of oversight of people seeking a CPA. And so she couldn't even get hired by an accounting firm. And so she ended up as a secretary in the speech and drama department at San Jose State. So, these kinds of things sort of grate on you. And so that's when, through my work on the Human Relations Commission, City Council, I got this whole thought about trying to speak out for those who are underrepresented or not represented, and to do that with integrity. And so that's what I did. I think back on my own life, and I had some great mentors and teachers along the way. And I've been very, very fortunate to be able to live my bucket list. There aren't very many people probably who can say that, but when I think back on what I've done, and I remember someone asked me one time, which is the job you like the most? Mayor, Congress, whatever. And I said, that's like asking me which of my children do I love the most? Because each of those jobs were different in a little way, one from another. And So the job I did enjoy the most was being mayor of San Jose, because I could work with the city council, figure out, okay, what would we like to do in the next 3 to 5 years, put a budget together, and see it getting done in 3 and 5 years. In Congress, it takes forever. I mean, the Civil Liberties Act of 1988 took 10 years to get that passed. So it does require also a great deal of patience as you're trying to make these things happen. So, but again, let me thank all of you for taking time from your own very busy schedules to be here at the Reagan Library. For me, it's a real thrill to have this opportunity to be here at the Reagan Library today, and I know you'd rather be at home doing the dishes or laundry or mowing the lawn or whatever, so.
Well, please join me in thanking Secretary Minetta for his time this morning.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.
We have the Minetta Legacy Project to talk about how do we preserve and continue to educate people about the story of Secretary Minetta. So I invite Rylan from Stanford to come up and share a little bit about how you can access this story. We don't always get Secretary Minetta in person, so how can you still access the resources and stories that he has? So come on up, Rylan.
Thank you. It's a tough act to follow. But I'm here today. My name is Rylan Sekiguchi. I am with an organization at Stanford called the Stanford Program on International and Cross-Cultural Education, which is a mouthful, so we just say SPICE. So I work at SPICE. And I'm here today to tell you a little bit about the project that we are doing, that we are currently developing with the Minetta Legacy Project. So it is an educational project that ties into the life and career of Secretary Minetta, but tries to give it a little bit of a broader context so that schools anywhere, teachers anywhere can use these materials to teach about these subjects. So this is going to be very quick, but I just want to give you guys a preview of what we're developing here. So I'll talk a little bit about who our organizations are, and then I'll show you a little bit of the materials that we've developed here. So we comprise two organizations. I am from SPICE at Stanford University. We are a program of the Freeman Spogli Institute on International Studies. So basically my boss's boss, that organization, is interested in doing all types of research on international issues. And our job is to basically serve as a bridge between all of that research that gets done at Stanford on these international and cross-cultural issues and try to translate it and make it usable to schools, mostly K-12, but we also do some work in colleges as well. So we say K-14 or so. We do that through 3 different ways. We develop curriculum materials, we do teacher development workshops and opportunities, and we also offer courses directly to high school students. Oh, excuse me. I'm also here with my colleagues, Deborah and Amy here in the front row, who are from the Minetta Legacy Project. Now, the Minetta Legacy Project is kind of an umbrella term for a 2-pronged project. One prong is the 1-hour documentary film that has been developed, and we're happy to say we'll have a national PBS airing next month. And the second prong is this online curriculum resource that we want to share for free to all educators around the world. So the first part of that is, of course, the documentary. It is called Norman Mineta and His Legacy, An American Story. You can get more information at minettalegacyproject.com. And if you're interested, this is the information here about our PBS broadcast. It'll be on a Monday night, May 20th, at 9 p.m. in most areas. It should be local time. But check your listings, because it actually depends on your particular PBS station, what time they will air it. But in most locales, it's going to be at 9 p.m. on May 20th. The second prong is the online curriculum. And so what we have done is that, like I said, we wanted to take kind of the big, large themes from this documentary film and from the life and career of Secretary Minetta, and kind of pull the big themes out and have them be examined and discussed in different classrooms. So what we did is we created an online curriculum called What Does It Mean to Be an American? And if you go to that URL there, you'll find a landing page because it is still in development, but shortly we will launch the full website. So a quick look at what this entails. Basically, it's just one question that we're asking, a central question. So what does it mean to be an American, which is the title, of course, of our project? We look at that question through 6 different angles. So the topic of immigration, which of course is a very common classroom topic of civil liberties and equity, civic engagement, etc. So each of these is basically kind of a perspective that we want students to take while they ask themselves this question of what does it mean to be an American? And we provide a number of different classroom tools to help with that examination. So readings, videos, primary sources, class discussions, etc. Civil Liberties and Equity is one of the ones that I will show you today, some materials from today. And actually, I'm going to switch over now to the website. Now, what I'm going to show you is what we currently have online. So if you can go to the next tab. Yes, so this is what does it mean to be an American.com. Currently, it is basically just a landing page, but it will eventually host our real site. If you go to the next tab, this is what it's going to look like. This is currently our beta site. So in the top right, you can see that there are menus for students and teachers. So it's a portal for both students and teachers to access these lessons. And if we go to the next tab, it will show you what the student page looks like for this one particular lesson on civil liberties and equity. So as you scroll down, you can see that there are different activities. They're marked by either an activity tag or a discussion tag or an assignment tag. But you'll see that they occur basically in the order in which you would want to teach them in the classroom. But if we go to the next tab, I'll show you what the teacher side looks like. It is the same order, but it is broken up into kind of an actual lesson plan. So first step 1, you do this and this and this. Once you click into one of these, if we go to the next tab, this is what one of those boxes will look like for the teacher. So this is an example of a reading, a web page that features a reading, like a content reading. So if we scroll down the page, you'll see that there are procedures for the teacher, but as you keep on scrolling, basically it is text that is supplemented by a bunch of sometimes graphs, sometimes a lot of archival photos that go along with the narrative that you're reading about. So in this case, they're learning about the internment experience. And usually at the end of these readings, we'll have discussion questions that the teachers can use at the very end. The next tab is an example of a video page. So we'll have embedded videos that we kind of custom created for this curriculum that focus on these different topics. So this is on civil liberties and equity. So we talk about civil liberties, civil rights, etc. So one of the videos that we're producing is people talking about kind of their personal but current day experiences of discrimination and how they have learned to deal with it and kind of overcome those experiences. So that's an example of a video page. I'll show you just a couple more. The next one is an example of kind of a discussion and group activity page. So one thing that the students will do is they'll define civil liberties themselves. So the students who are here, how would you define civil liberties? Anyone want to just offer a definition? No one wants to offer a definition? Oh, yes. Oh, wow, okay, that's kind of deep, actually. The answer was something you have that you're born with. So yes, actually. So one of the definitions I like about civil liberties is that it is kind of a set of individual rights that are retained by individuals as opposed to granted by the government, right? So it's actually, in a way, that's pretty deep. I like that a lot. Yeah, so very good. So after students define what civil liberties are, then you ask them, what are some examples? They'll say, you know, freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, whatever. And then you ask them, okay, where does it come from? And most students will say, well, if they've had background in it, you know, they'll say Bill of Rights, Constitution. So this example is an example of an activity that you would do after that, in which they would take their set of what they think are civil liberties, and they'll try to trace it back to the actual document. So if you scroll down, you'll have, you know, the individual articles in the Constitution, et cetera, et cetera. And the very last page that I want to show you is basically kind of also based around the internment experience, but it's all based around the different types of primary sources. So if you scroll down a little bit lower, under the questions, you'll have these gallery exhibits. If you were to click into one of them, anyone is fine. That's fine, yeah. So this is photos of the forced removal. So if you scroll down, it's kind of like, we're treating it like a mini exhibit at a museum. So say you're walking into like a corner of a museum exhibit, and all of those photos are about the evacuation. And so they look at these primary documents, then they are given discussion questions under it, in which they have to like really dissect the images, try to understand what's going on. And then they come together as a class after that, after having reviewed the different exhibits, and hopefully they come to a more complete and better understanding of a variety of aspects around the incarceration. And so that is basically all I have time to show you today. But if we can go back to the PowerPoint, actually the final slide. As I said, this is something that we are currently developing. It is still in beta site, but we are planning to release it in the summer or fall. So if you are interested, please visit our website come the summer or the fall, or tell your teacher to, please. And again, it is whatdoesitmeantobeanamerican.com. And as a reminder, the film is going to be screening on May 20th at 9 p.m. So please sign up if you're interested in getting a notification about that. Otherwise, that's my time, and thank you for the opportunity to present here.